Hello, I'm John Hemingway. Welcome back to Shropshire. Now, if I asked you to pick out a set of clothes that would keep you comfortable, regardless of whether the temperature was 16 degrees C or -2, you would struggle. Regardless of what you picked, you'd either be too hot in the day or too cold at night. Now, 16, 17, 18 degree difference between the temperature in the middle of the day and the temperature in the middle of the night is not unheard of or even uncommon at this time of year, and your lambs have got to deal with that. So is it any wonder that we get losses to pneumonia in lambs at this time of year? So what is pneumonia? Where are they catching it from? And is there anything you can do about it? Well, stick with me and I will explain. Okay, so let's talk lamb pneumonia. Now, when we're talking about deaths from pneumonia in lambs in the autumn, it's important to make the distinction that this is very different from the pneumonia that we see in adult ewes or even in much younger lambs, or definitely in people. This is a rapid onset, high mortality pneumonia, where what actually kills the lambs is septicemia. The pneumonia deaths in lambs that we see at this time of year are normally caused by a bacteria known as Bibbersteinia, and that bacteria lives normally in the tonsils of the lamb in the upper airways quite happily. Now, things start to go wrong here when we get a stressor on those lambs. Something stresses them. With stress, in sheep comes immunosuppression. The immune system gets a little bit run down. This is true of people as well. You know, when you're very stressed, you feel run down, you're more likely to get spots break out, you get cold sores if you're carrying that virus. So the same thing applies. And those bugs, the Bibbersteinia that live up in the tonsils, suddenly think, now is our chance. The immune system is suppressed. We will invade down into the lower airways, into the lungs where they're not supposed to be, and create an opportunistic infection. What happens is that Bibbersteinia gets down into the lungs, and because the lungs are very well vascularized, really good blood flow to the lungs, that bacteria has the scope to enter the bloodstream, to spread around the body and cause septicemia, sepsis. And we know how serious that is in people, in all species. That is what rapidly kills these lambs. Well, anything that puts stress on lambs. A sudden big fluctuations in temperature during short periods of time, changes in diet, which we often see this time of year when people put lambs onto roots. It could be transport, moving animals away to distant grazing. It could be mixing of two different groups. So what can we do if we find ourselves in the situation where we come out one morning and found that we've got a handful of dead ones there? Well, the first thing we can do is open them up and get them post-mortem, just a basic post-mortem. There are signs that you can see on post-mortem when a lamb has died of septicemia. But the other reason it's a good idea to do a post-mortem on lambs this time of year is to see whether there are fluke there. And of course you can get acute death with fluke as well. Once you've established that what you're tackling is actually Bibbersteinia infection, some people will say that we should treat the entire group with oxytetracycline. It is far from clear cut whether doing that makes any difference at all. What it does do, of course, is force you to gather all of those lambs, and that in itself is a stressor and could lead to you having more deaths. Now, you should discuss these situations with your vet, but on balance, often the best thing to do is to leave the lambs as quietly as you can in the environment they're in. Now, we need to talk about prevention, and I know you will be thinking, well, my lambs are on Heptavac or they're on Overvac. That covers them against respiratory disease. And you're not wrong in saying that. Yes, there is a respiratory element to that vaccine. The jury is out, but potentially the period of protection that you get against bugs like Bibbersteinia after giving Heptavac is only 6 to 8 weeks. It's pretty likely that any protection they had against respiratory disease will have waned by the time we get to the autumn. In the data sheet for Heptavac and Overvac, there is licensed for an additional third dose in the autumn, and they say to give it 3 weeks before a period of increased risk. When we're talking about Bibbersteinia infections that come along because we have cold snaps unexpectedly warm, it's very hard to predict that that's going to happen 3 weeks in advance. But what we can predict is when we're going to be changing forage, when we're going to be moving lambs onto routes, when we're going to be mixing groups. If we know that we're buying in other lambs, we can predict when we're going to be transporting animals. So there are some things that we can plan for. We can use an additional dose of Heptavac or Overvac in advance of those events to minimize the impact on the lambs. That's all for this video. I hope it was useful and I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be along with another one very soon. I hope to see you there.